The drone of a vacuum cleaner echoing down the corridor mingled with a chill draft that crept beneath the heavy door of Suite 718. I brushed the perspiration from my forehead with the back of my hand, the sharp, chemical scent of bleach still clinging to my skin. 7 hours into my shift at the Grand Meridian Hotel, my fingers were shriveled and pale from scrubbing bathroom tiles with harsh disinfectants. "Housekeeping," I called out, rapping my knuckles on the door of the suite. There was no answer. I slid my master key into the electronic lock and pushed the heavy door open, immediately struck by the stark contrast between this room and the others I had cleaned that day. The heavy curtains were pulled tight, creating a twilight gloom despite the bright afternoon sun outside. A crystal decanter filled with amber liquid rested on a side table next to a glass that was half drained. The king-sized bed appeared untouched, yet a fine cashmere throw was tossed carelessly over the leather armchair. Someone had been here, but they hadn't slept. I moved silently through the space, gathering discarded towels and swapping them for fresh ones. The scent in the air was distinct here. It smelled of expensive cologne with deep notes of leather and cedar wood, nothing like the generic floral soap other guests used. My eyes landed on a briefcase in the corner. The leather was so fine it seemed to glow in the dim light. That single bag cost more than I earned in 2 weeks. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in the pocket of my uniform. My sister Moshe's name lit up the screen. I hesitated. We were strictly forbidden from taking personal calls during shifts, but Moshe was watching my daughter, Katia, while I worked a double. I answered quickly, turning my back to the room and facing the window. "Da? What happened?" I whispered in Russian. "Katia's fever has returned," Moshe replied in our native tongue. "It is at 103. Should I give her the medicine from yesterday, or do I need to take her to urgent care?" My heart tightened in my chest. "The pink bottle in the bathroom cabinet," I said. "Give her 2 teaspoons. If the fever doesn't drop in an hour, call Dr. Petrov." I recited the number to her, still speaking in Russian. The language felt like a small, comforting tether to home as my words rushed out faster with worry. That was when I heard it. The quiet, distinct click of the hotel room door closing. I spun around, nearly dropping my phone in the process. A man was standing in the entryway, his silhouette backlit by the hallway lights. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that had clearly been tailored to fit his powerful build. His dark hair was swept back from his face, revealing features that looked as if they had been sculpted from stone, high cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with precise stubble, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Behind him stood another man, wider and taller, with a blank expression and a slight bulge beneath his jacket that I immediately recognized as a concealed weapon. "I will call you back," I whispered to Moshe, ending the call. "I apologize, sir," I said, switching to English, my accent thickening with nervousness. "I was just finishing up." The man did not move from the doorway. Instead, he studied me with an unnerving stillness. It wasn't a leer, I had experienced plenty of those from hotel guests, but a cold assessment, as if he were cataloging every detail about me. "You speak Russian," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. His voice was deep, carrying an accent I couldn't quite place. It sounded European, but not Russian like mine. "Yes, sir. I am almost done here." I gathered my cleaning supplies, trying to hide how badly my hands were shaking. "What is your name?" he asked, finally taking a step into the room. The bodyguard remained at the door, eyes forward, as still as a statue. "Anastasia," I answered, using the Americanized version of my name that was printed on my name tag rather than my full name, Anastasia Netsova. "Anastasia," he repeated, making my ordinary name sound like something precious. "You work here every day?" "5 days a week." I edged toward the door, dragging my cleaning cart with me, but he shifted his weight slightly, blocking my exit without appearing to do so deliberately. My pulse quickened as I realized how easily he controlled the space, how completely he dominated the room without raising his voice or making any overtly threatening gestures. "Do you have family here in the city?" His questions felt casual, but his eyes remained focused and intent. "Just my daughter and sister," I replied, then immediately regretted offering even that small piece of personal information. Something about this man made me want to disappear, to become as invisible as housekeepers were supposed to be. He nodded slightly, then reached into his jacket pocket. I tensed, but he withdrew only a silver money clip, peeling off several $100 bills. "For your discretion," he said, extending them toward me. "I value my privacy." I hesitated. The money represented nearly a week's salary, and Katia needed medicine, new shoes, and so many other things. But something about this interaction felt dangerous, like taking the money would create a connection I couldn't sever. Before I could decide, the door swung open again. Another man entered, younger, sharply dressed in an Italian suit with a phone pressed to his ear. He stopped abruptly when he saw me. "Dimitri," the first man acknowledged without looking away from me. "We will continue in a moment." The newcomer's eyes flicked between us, then narrowed slightly. He spoke rapidly into the phone in Italian, then ended the call. "Adrien, we have a situation at the docks. Costello's men are making trouble." Adrien. So that was his name. It didn't sound Russian, but something in the way he carried himself reminded me of the powerful men from my homeland, men who operated in the shadows, whose names were whispered rather than spoken aloud. "Handle it," Adrien replied, his eyes still fixed on me. "They are asking for you specifically," Dimitri insisted. "They say they will only deal with the boss." A muscle in Adrien's jaw tightened. After a moment, he tucked the money into the pocket of my uniform apron, his fingers brushing against the fabric covering my collarbone. The touch, though brief, sent an electric current through my body. "For your daughter," he said quietly. His eyes held mine for one more long moment before he turned away. "Make sure Suite 718 is added to her regular cleaning schedule," he instructed Dimitri as they walked out. "And find out more about our Russian maid." The door closed behind them, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My fingers trembled as I reached for the money in my pocket, half convinced the encounter had been a hallucination. But the crisp bills were real, as was the business card tucked between them. It was black matte card stock with only a phone number embossed in silver. I should have thrown it away. I should have requested a different floor assignment, called in sick the next day, or done anything to avoid crossing paths with Adrien again. Instead, I slipped the card into my bra, next to my heart, and told myself it was just for emergencies, just in case Katia's condition worsened and we needed help. I didn't know then that I had already made my first mistake. By accepting his money, by keeping his card, by speaking Russian in his presence, I had already entered his world. And in Adrien Sokolov's world, nothing happened by accident. The next morning dawned grey and drizzly, matching my mood as I dragged myself out of bed at 5 a.m. Katia's fever had broken during the night, but she remained listless, curled up beside me in the small bed we shared in our one-bedroom apartment. I brushed her dark curls away from her forehead, relieved to find it cool to the touch. "Mama has to go to work," I whispered, kissing her cheek. "Be good for Auntie Moshe." Her eyes fluttered open, dark lashes framing eyes identical to mine. "Can I have pancakes?" she mumbled sleepily. "If you are feeling better," I promised, my heart squeezing with love and worry. At 6 years old, she was already too familiar with illness. Her immune system had been weakened by a bout of pneumonia last winter that had nearly claimed her life, and had claimed all of our savings and then some. The hospital bills still arrived monthly, each one a reminder of how precarious our situation remained. Despite working 60-hour weeks at the Grand Meridian and picking up weekend shifts at a local diner, I barely kept us afloat. Medical debt, rent, groceries, and the constant fear that immigration services might question the documentation I'd used to secure employment kept me awake most nights. As I prepared for work in our tiny bathroom, I found myself touching the business card hidden in my wallet. The memory of Adrien's intense gaze made my stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with fear, or at least, not entirely fear. There had been something else in that look, something that had made me feel seen for the first time since arriving in America 4 years ago. On the subway, pressed between commuters, I tried to focus on my plan for the day. Clean rooms, avoid Suite 718, pick up an extra shift if possible, and stop by the pharmacy for Katia's medicine. Simple, achievable, safe. But as I swiped my employee card at the service entrance of the Grand Meridian, my supervisor, Gloria, waved me over with a stern expression that immediately set my nerves on edge. "Anastasia, management wants to see you." Her tone suggested I was in trouble, but her eyes held a different emotion, curiosity, perhaps even concern. "Why?" I asked, my accent thickening as it always did when I was nervous. "Don't know," she replied. "But when the owner of the hotel asks for a specific maid by name, it is usually not good." She lowered her voice. "Did you take something from a room? Break something expensive?" "No, nothing like that," I said, my mind racing. The owner. Adrien had said to add his suite to my cleaning schedule, but I hadn't expected such a direct intervention. "Well, they are waiting in Mr. Petrov's office," Gloria said. She handed me a fresh uniform. "Change first. You look like you slept in that one." 10 minutes later, with my heart hammering against my ribs, I knocked on the hotel manager's door. The plaque read Viktor Petrov, General Manager. He was a fellow Russian, though he'd never acknowledged our shared heritage beyond a raised eyebrow at my paperwork when I was hired. "Enter," called a voice from within. I stepped inside to find Viktor seated behind his massive desk, his usual look of detached superiority replaced by something approaching deference. Because standing by the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline, was Adrien. Today, he wore a deep blue suit that made his shoulders appear even broader. When he turned to look at me, I noticed his eyes weren't black as I'd first thought, but a midnight blue so dark it bordered on obsidian. They warmed slightly as they landed on me. "Ah, Anastasia," Viktor said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair opposite his desk. "Mr. Sokolov has specifically requested your services." I remained standing, my hands clasped in front of me to hide their trembling. "My services," I repeated, glancing between Viktor and Adrien. "Mr. Sokolov owns the Meridian Hotel Group," Viktor explained, his tone deferential in a way I'd never heard before. "He has requested that you be reassigned as dedicated staff for the penthouse suite." The penthouse. Not just Suite 718, but the crown jewel of the Grand Meridian, occupying the entire top floor with its own private elevator and security. I had only glimpsed it once during training, marveling at the panoramic views and furnishings. That cost a sum greater than what I could hope to accumulate in 10 years of labor. "I do not understand," I stated, meeting Adrien's gaze directly for the very first time since I had walked into the room. "I am simply a regular housekeeper." Adrien turned away from the window, placing each footstep with deliberate precision. "I have a preference for consistency regarding my staff," he replied, his voice holding that same hushed command I had noted yesterday. "Furthermore, I possess very specific requirements for the upkeep of my residence." Residence, he had said, not suite or room. The realization struck me then that Adrien Sokolov did not merely possess the hotel, he actually dwelled here. "The role comes with a substantial increase in pay," Viktor contributed, sliding a document across the surface of the desk toward me. "2 times your current wages, in addition to benefits." I gazed down at the paper without making physical contact with it. A doubled salary would equate to adequate medical treatment for Katia. It might even facilitate a relocation to a more secure neighborhood. It had the potential to alter our entire existence. However, my gut instinct warned me that this proposal arrived with invisible tethers attached. "I require a response this afternoon," Adrien stated, his tone not unkind. "I will be departing for Europe tomorrow and need my staffing arrangements to be concluded before I go. May I inquire as to what the position entails, precisely?" I managed to ask, feeling a sense of pride that my voice remained steady. Adrien signaled to Viktor, who rose from his seat and excused himself, shutting the door behind him with a quiet snap. The instant we were solitary, the atmosphere transformed, becoming heavy with a tension that caused the fine hairs on my arms to stand on end. "The position is simple," Adrien explained, leaning against the desk near enough that I could detect the scent of his cologne, sandalwood mixed with something deeper, more elemental. "You will maintain the penthouse, oversee household inventory, and guarantee that absolute privacy is upheld." "And regarding my schedule?" I queried, my thoughts immediately going to Katia. 6 until 2, Monday through Friday. No weekends, and no holidays. His stare was unyielding. "I realize you have a daughter to think of." The reference to Katia sent a shiver of cold down my spine. How are you aware of my daughter? A faint smile touched his lips. I make it my priority to know everything regarding the people who work closely with me, which includes monitoring their telephone conversations. I dared to look at him, recalling how he had materialized right after my conversation with Moshe. Rather than fury, his smile widened, exposing a dimple in his right cheek that softened his harsh countenance into something nearly welcoming. Including that, yes, I ought to have been incensed by the invasion of my privacy. Conversely, I felt a twisted gratitude for his candor. Why choose me? I questioned, the inquiry that had been burning in my mind since I had been summoned. Adrien pushed off the desk and eliminated the distance between us. He halted close enough that I was forced to tilt my head back to hold his eye contact, yet not so near that it felt menacing. You are fluent in Russian, he stated plainly. I have numerous Russian associates. Possessing staff who comprehend the language is practical. I was convinced there was more to it than that. Yet, I did not push the matter. The salary figure on the contract caught my eye once more. It would remedy so many of my problems. If I agree, I spoke with caution, I would need a guarantee that the employment is legitimate. Adrien's expression stiffened for a fraction of a second before he laughed, the sound low and rich. You are inquiring if I am implicating you in something illicit. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The position is exactly as described. Housekeeping, nothing more. He paused, observing me closely. Though I appreciate your prudence, Anastasia Nitova. The usage of my full name, my true name, sent a shock of panic through me. It was not listed on my employment paperwork. It was not on anything official in America. How did you? As I mentioned, I make it my business to be informed. He returned to the desk, selected an expensive-looking fountain pen, and extended it toward me. The choice is yours, but I need an answer immediately. I accepted the pen, its weight substantial in my hand. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at me to walk away. Yet, I could not ignore what this opportunity meant for Katia. For us, I affixed my signature. Adrien took the pen from my fingers, his own brushing against mine in a touch that felt deliberate. Welcome to my staff, Anastasia. He pressed a key card into my palm. You begin tomorrow. The penthouse surpassed every expectation I had harbored. Vast rooms with soaring ceilings opened onto a wraparound terrace with views that stretched to the horizon. Artwork I recognized from museum textbooks hung on the walls, and furniture that belonged in design magazines was arranged throughout the space. It was not just wealthy. It was cultured, sophisticated in a way that spoke of old money and refined taste. For 3 days, I worked in solitude, meticulously cleaning spaces that barely showed signs of use. Adrien had left for Europe, as mentioned, and I found myself oddly disappointed by his absence. The penthouse felt like a stage set without its main character, beautiful but hollow. On the 4th day, as I was arranging fresh flowers in the main living area, the private elevator hummed to life. My pulse quickened, though I told myself it was merely surprise at the unexpected arrival. I set down the crystal vase and smoothed my uniform. Suddenly conscious of my appearance, I watched the elevator doors slide open to reveal not Adrien, but the man he'd called Dmitri, accompanied by 2 unfamiliar men in dark suits. They carried leather briefcases and spoke rapidly in Italian, falling silent when they noticed me. You must be the new girl, Dmitri said, assessing me with cool detachment. Unlike Adrien, whose gaze had felt like it peeled away layers, Dmitri felt dismissive, as if I were merely another piece of furniture. Coffee for 3, conference room. His tone made it clear he was accustomed to being obeyed without question. I nodded and moved toward the kitchen, listening as they continued down the hallway to what Adrien had referred to as the study on my orientation paperwork, but which appeared to be a fully equipped conference room. As I prepared the coffee service, Adrien's documents had specified exactly how it should be arranged. I heard the murmur of voices rise and fall from the study. Though tempted to linger and listen, I reminded myself of the contract I'd signed with its extensive confidentiality clauses and penalties for breaches. I knocked once on the study door before entering with the tray. The men fell silent immediately. Spread across the conference table were documents, maps, and what looked like architectural plans. Dmitri quickly gathered them up as I sat down the coffee service. "That will be all," he said curtly, dismissing me without a glance. I turned to leave, but one of the other men called out in Italian. Though I didn't speak the language, his tone and gesture made it clear he was asking about me. Dmitri responded in the same language, his voice tight. I caught only one word I recognized, *Sokolov star. The man raised an eyebrow, looking at me with renewed interest. He said something else, this time with a smirk, and the third man laughed. Though I couldn't understand the words, I recognized the sentiment. I had heard similar insinuations from hotel guests over the years. Dimitri's response was sharp, silencing them both. He glanced at me, irritation clear on his face. "You are dismissed." I left quickly, cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Whatever they assumed about my relationship with Adrien was not only incorrect, but demeaning. I was a housekeeper. Nothing more. The fact that my heart had raced at the thought of his return was irrelevant, a foolish reaction to a powerful man who had shown me a modicum of respect. I threw myself into cleaning the guest bathrooms with unnecessary vigor, scrubbing at non-existent stains as I tried to purge the humiliation from my system. So focused was I on my task that I didn't hear the elevator arrive again. I did not notice another presence in the penthouse until a shadow fell across the marble floor. "You are going to wear away the finish," came a familiar deep voice. I jerked upright, nearly dropping the brush. Adrien stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. He'd removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, giving him a slightly more approachable appearance, though no less imposing. "Mr. Sokolov," I gasped. "I didn't expect you back so soon." His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "And I thought we'd established you would call me Adrien in private." We had established no such thing, but I didn't correct him. "I prepared the master suite as instructed," I said instead, gathering my cleaning supplies. "Fresh linens, the fret collection you specified." He nodded, watching me with that same intense focus I remembered. "You have been busy while I was away." "Just doing my job." "Chem." He stepped into the bathroom, reducing the space between us to mere feet. "And how are you finding it?" "Your new position?" "It is different," I admitted. Very quiet until Dmitri and his associates arrived. His question was casual, but something in his tone suggested he was fishing for information. I stiffened. "I don't listen to private conversations, if that's what you're asking." Adrien studied me for a long moment, then smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features and crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I was not accusing you, Anastasia, merely making conversation." The use of my full name, spoken with his slight accent, sent an unwelcome warmth through me. "I should finish up," I said, desperate to escape the confines of the bathroom and the unsettling effect of his presence. "One moment." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "For your daughter. I understand she's been ill." I froze, staring at the box as if it might bite. "That is not necessary. It is a gift, not payment," he said, voice soft but insistent. "Take it." Against my better judgment, I accepted the box. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet sized for a child's wrist, adorned with a small star charm. It was beautiful, tasteful, and undoubtedly expensive. "I cannot accept this," I said, attempting to return it. Adrien closed my fingers around the box, his hand warm over mine. "You can, and you will." The words were firm, but not unkind. "Consider it a welcome gift." Before I could respond, the door to the penthouse burst open and a woman's voice rang out high and agitated, speaking rapid-fire Russian. "Adrien, where are you?" Adrien's expression hardened instantly, his jaw tightening as he released my hand. "Stay here," he instructed in a low voice, then strode out of the bathroom toward the commotion. I remained frozen for a moment, the gift box clutched in my hand. Curiosity overrode caution, and I peered around the door frame to see a striking blonde woman pacing the living room. She wore a red designer dress that hugged her perfect figure, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. Beautiful, yes, but her face was contorted with anger. "Veronica," Adrien said coldly, stopping several feet away from her. What are you doing here? You missed our dinner, she snapped in accented English, switching from Russian. 2 hours I waited at Le Bernardin like a fool. We had no plans, Adrien replied, his voice controlled but edged with impatience. And you know better than to show up unannounced. She laughed, the sound brittle. No plans. Your assistant confirmed yesterday. Her gaze darted around the penthouse, then narrowed as she spotted me hovering in the hallway. And now I see why you forgot. You are entertaining your staff. The way she spat the last word made my cheeks flame. I retreated into the bathroom, mortified at being caught eavesdropping, but unable to ignore the heated exchange that followed. That is enough, Adrien said, his voice dropping to a dangerous timbre I hadn't heard before. You are making a scene rooted in a misunderstanding? Veronica's voice climbed in pitch, incredulous. 3 years we have been together, and suddenly you are too busy to join me for dinner. For my part, ever since Milan, you have been distant, and now I discover you in here with my housekeeper. Adrien cut her off, his enunciation sharp and slicing. She is performing her job, Veronica, which is more than I can say for my assistant if he placed an appointment on my calendar without my knowledge. A strained silence hung in the air, eventually broken by the sharp click of heels against the marble flooring, drawing nearer to my position. I immediately busied myself with organizing the cleaning supplies, offering a silent prayer that she would not enter the room. My plea went unanswered. Veronica materialized in the doorway, her blue eyes icy with contempt as they raked over me from head to toe. So, this is what captures your attention these days? She directed the question at Adrien, who had trailed behind her. A maid. How utterly predictable. That is enough, Veronica. Adrien's voice had dropped to a deadly quiet. He grasped her elbow, firmly guiding her away from the bathroom and away from me. We will discuss this in private. I stood paralyzed, shame searing through my veins like acid. To be reduced to nothing more than a target of suspicion, a perceived threat to this glamorous woman's romance, was degrading in a manner that far exceeded the usual invisibility of being household staff. Their voices drifted away as Adrien steered Veronica toward his study. I heard the heavy door shut securely, followed by the muffled vibrations of their argument continuing behind it. I knew I should have finished my tasks and departed immediately, yet something kept me rooted to the spot. Perhaps it was pride. I refused to scurry away into the shadows like some guilty secret. I continued my work, focusing with intense dedication on every motion, attempting to disregard the knot tightening in my stomach. The velvet box containing the bracelet sat heavy in my pocket, suddenly feeling less like an innocent gift for a sick child and more like evidence of some impropriety. 20 minutes later, the study door opened. I kept my gaze locked on the bathroom mirror I was polishing, refusing to lift my eyes, even as I heard the staccato of high heels marching toward the main entrance, followed by the softer, rhythmic tread of Adrien's Italian leather shoes. I will call you tomorrow, he said to Veronica, his tone neutral now, every ounce of emotion rigorously reined in. Don't bother, she retorted coldly. The elevator doors slid open, then shut, and silence reclaimed the penthouse once more. I sensed, rather than heard, Adrien walking back toward the bathroom. He appeared in the doorway, his reflection joining mine in the glass. His expression was illegible, though a small muscle ticked in his jaw. I apologize for that scene, he said. After a pause, I lowered my cleaning cloth and turned to face him. It is not my place to offer commentary on your personal life, Mr. Sokolov. Back to Mr. Sokolov, is it? A spark flickered in his eyes. It might have been amusement, or perhaps frustration. And yet, you were pulled into my personal life quite dramatically just now. I remained silent, uncertain of how to answer. Adrien sighed, dragging a hand through his dark hair. The action appeared uncharacteristically human, a stark contrast to his typically composed demeanor. Veronica and I share a complicated history. What she insinuated regarding you was inappropriate and entirely unfounded. It does not matter, I said. Though, in truth, it did. I should finish up and leave you to your evening. Do you have plans? He asked abruptly. The question caught me off balance. Plans after work tonight. His gaze was fixed, searching my face as though my after-hours activities were somehow of critical importance. I hesitated, then concluded there was no harm in the truth. I pick up my daughter from my sister's house, make dinner, and help with homework. Nothing special. He nodded, as if validating something within his own mind. And the bracelet. Will you give it to her? The velvet box seemed to burn against my hip. I shouldn't. But you will, he said. It was not a question, but a declaration. Because it will make her happy. I could not deny it. The image of Katya's face lighting up at the sight of the delicate silver bracelet was already eroding my resolve to return the gift. Why are you doing this? I asked, the words escaping before I could check them. Adrien's expression softened, the shift almost imperceptible. Does there need to be a specific reason for kindness? In my experience, yes, I replied, the words emerging more bitterly than I had intended, particularly when it comes to powerful men. Rather than taking offense, he laughed. It was a genuine sound that transformed his features, making him appear younger and almost approachable. Fair enough. Let us simply say I have my reasons and leave it at that for the moment. Before I could press him further, his phone began to ring. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened instantly. I need to take this. We will continue our conversation another time, Anastasia. He answered the call as he strode away, speaking in rapid-fire Italian. I caught only the tension in his tone, the sudden reversion from the almost relaxed man who had laughed seconds ago to the formidable figure who commanded respect by his mere existence. I gathered my cleaning supplies and prepared to depart, trying to suppress the confusion swirling within me. This job was intended to be straightforward, clean the penthouse, maintain discretion, and collect a better paycheck. Nothing in the employment contract mentioned navigating jealous girlfriends, accepting gifts, or questioning the true nature of Adrien Sokolov's interest in me. As I waited for the service elevator, I cast a glance back toward the penthouse interior. Through the open door of the study, I could see Adrien standing by the window, the phone pressed to his ear, his profile severe against the backdrop of the New York skyline. He looked powerful, dangerous, and compelling in a way I did not wish to examine too closely. The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside, telling myself that tomorrow would be simpler. I told myself I would maintain professional boundaries and emotional distance, that I would remember who I was and who he was, and all the insurmountable differences those identities entailed. I was lying to myself, naturally, but sometimes lies are a necessity for survival. Mama, look. It sparkles. Katya twirled in front of our small bathroom mirror, the silver bracelet glinting on her slender wrist. Her delight was infectious, her smile brighter than I had witnessed in weeks. It is beautiful on you, Solnishko. I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the clean scent of her freshly washed hair, my sunshine, my light. But remember what I told you. It is very special, so you must be careful with it. I will never take it off, she declared with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old. Is it from a secret admirer? I nearly choked on my tea. Where did you learn that phrase? Auntie Moshe was watching a show. Katya shrugged, still admiring the jewelry. She said sometimes ladies receive presents from secret admirers who love them. It is just from a friend, I said carefully. Now, time for bed. You have school tomorrow. Later, after Katya had fallen asleep, I sat at our tiny kitchen table with Moshe, nursing a glass of cheap wine. A friend, huh? Moshe arched an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. Must be quite a friend to give silver jewelry to a child he has never met. It is not like that, I insisted, though I was not entirely certain what it was like. He is my employer. Moshe's eyes widened. The hotel owner. Nastia, what are you getting yourself into? Nothing. It was a get-well gift, that is all. I took a large swallow of wine. His daughter probably has dozens of bracelets just like that. Does he have a daughter? The question stopped me short. I realized I knew almost nothing about Adrien's personal life beyond what I had witnessed with Veronica. I do not know, I admitted. Moshe leaned forward, her expression turning serious. Listen to me. Men like that rich, powerful men, they do not give gifts without expecting something in return. Be careful. I know what I am doing, I said, speaking more to convince myself than her. It is just a job, a good one that pays well and gives us stability. Moshe did not look convinced, but she dropped the subject, turning instead to gossip about her co-workers at the diner. I only half listened, my mind drifting back to the moment in the bathroom when Adrien's laugh had transformed him from an intimidating boss into something far more dangerous, a man I could find myself attracted to. The following week passed in a strange rhythm. Adrien was rarely at the penthouse during my shifts, but evidence of his presence accumulated in small ways. A glass of scotch left on the terrace, a tie draped over a chair, books moved from shelves to bedside tables. I found myself studying these small signs, piecing together a picture of the man from the fragments he left behind. His taste in literature surprised me. Russian classics like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, yes, but also poetry, philosophy, and even contemporary fiction. One day, I found a collection of Akhmatova's work, the pages dog-eared and annotated in a strong, slanting hand. I traced my fingers over his handwritten notes in the margins, feeling that this unexpected glimpse into his mind was more intimate than anything I had encountered in his personal spaces. On Friday, as I was preparing to leave, the private elevator hummed to life. Adrien stepped out, accompanied by the silent bodyguard I had seen on that first day. Both men looked exhausted. Adrien's usual immaculate appearance was slightly rumpled, as if he had been wearing the same suit for too long. "Anastasia," he acknowledged me with a nod. "I thought you would be gone by now." "Just finishing up," I replied, suddenly conscious of having let my hair down from its usual practical bun. "You are back earlier than expected." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You have been tracking my schedule." "It affects my work," I said quickly, feeling heat rise to my cheeks, knowing when to expect occupancy. "Of course." He shrugged out of his suit jacket, wincing slightly as he rolled his shoulder. "Are you injured?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Adrien's expression closed immediately. "Nothing serious. A minor disagreement." The bodyguard made a sound that might have been a suppressed snort. Adrien shot him a look, and the man retreated to take up a position by the door with a murmured, "I will be outside, boss." Once we were alone, Adrien loosened his tie and sank onto the sofa with uncharacteristic weariness. "You have a good eye, Anastasia. Most people would not notice." "I notice everything," I said simply. "It is part of the job." "And what else have you noticed?" He gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, aware that I was already 15 minutes past the end of my shift. "That you read Akhmatova in the original Russian," I said, nodding toward the book on the side table. "That you prefer Macallan to Glenlivet. That you sleep on the right side of the bed even though you live alone." He looked genuinely surprised, then impressed. "Observant indeed. And what conclusions have you drawn from these observations?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was the safest route. "That you are more complex than you appear at first glance. That you value privacy but live in a hotel. That you are Russian, or at least have strong ties there, but prefer to speak English." Adrien studied me with renewed interest, as if seeing me properly for the first time. "All accurate. You would make a formidable intelligence agent, Anastasia Kuznetsova." "I am just a housekeeper," I reminded him, though we both knew it was not that simple. "My shoulder was dislocated," he said abruptly, changing the subject. "An old injury that sometimes flares up." I nodded, recognizing the lie but accepting it. Whatever had caused his injury, it was not my business. "Ice and rest will help." "Are you a doctor as well as a housekeeper?" There was that hint of amusement again, warming his dark eyes. "No, just a mother. Children seem to be constantly injuring themselves." I checked the watch on my wrist. On that subject, I really needed to leave. Katia would be waiting for me. "How is she doing? Did the bracelet please her?" The sincere curiosity in his tone took me by surprise. "She absolutely loves it. She asked me to convey her thanks to her secret admirer." Adrien chuckled, then grimaced as the motion aggravated his injured shoulder. "A secret admirer at age 6. She is certainly precocious. She inherits that trait from her father," I replied without thinking, instantly regretting the slip. "I never spoke of him. Not to a single soul here in America." Adrien's gaze sharpened with sudden interest. "I wasn't aware you were married." "I am not," I answered abruptly, wishing I could take back the remark. I am a widow. That wasn't the whole truth, but it was far simpler than explaining the reality. He had been my husband in every sense except the legal one. We had intended to wed once I found out I was pregnant, but by that time, it was already too late. He was arrested for his participation in a pro-democracy demonstration in Moscow, vanished into the penal system, and resurfaced 6 months later as a mere shell of his former self. He died of pneumonia in custody just 1 week before Katya was born, although the bruises covering his body suggested a very different story. I am sorry, Adrien said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. Recently, 4 years ago, before we came to America. I stepped toward the door, desperate to conclude this conversation before I exposed more than was safe. I really should go. Adrien stood up, moving with a fluid grace that always seemed contradictory to his powerful, muscular build. Of course, but before you leave, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. I looked at it with wariness. What is this? Tickets, he stated, extending the envelope. The Bolshoi Ballet is performing at Lincoln Center this weekend. Sleeping Beauty. I imagined your daughter might enjoy it. I stared at him in utter disbelief. Ballet tickets were vastly beyond my financial means, particularly for a prestigious company like the Bolshoi. Why would you consider it a bonus for your excellent work? He said smoothly, pressing the envelope firmly into my hands. 2 tickets, Saturday matinee. Unless you already have plans. No, but. Then it is settled. His tone allowed for no argument. My driver will collect you at noon. Your driver? I shook my head, finally finding my voice. That is unnecessary and inappropriate. Adrien's expression hardened just slightly. New York traffic is unpredictable. I would hate for you to miss the performance. Mr. Sokolov. Adrien. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You are being very generous. But I cannot accept this. The bracelet was already too much. You can, and you will. They were the same words he had used regarding the bracelet, delivered with the same quiet certainty. Your daughter deserves beautiful experiences, does she not? It was a masterful manipulation. Invoking Katya made refusal nearly impossible. Still, I hesitated. People will talk. Let them. He shrugged, then winced again at the movement. We both know the truth of the situation. Did we? I wasn't sure I knew anything anymore, least of all the truth of whatever was developing between us. But the thought of Katya's face when I told her we were going to the ballet. Thank you, I said finally, tucking the envelope into my bag. Katya will be thrilled. And you? His eyes held mine, searching. Will you enjoy it as well? The question felt weighted with a meaning I couldn't quite decipher. I love ballet, I admitted, though I haven't seen a performance since leaving Russia. Something resembling satisfaction crossed his features. Then I have chosen well. Enjoy your evening, Anastasia. As I rode the service elevator down, clutching the envelope of tickets, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just agreed to something far more significant than a simple ballet performance. That with each gift accepted, each personal detail shared, I was being drawn deeper into Adrien's world, a world I still understood only in fragments and glimpses. A real ballet? Katya spun in circles around our tiny living room, her arms raised in a clumsy approximation of a ballerina's pose. With tutus and point shoes and everything? Real ballet, I confirmed, laughing at her enthusiasm. The Bolshoi is the most famous company in Russia. Mama used to watch them when I was a girl. Katya stopped spinning, her eyes wide. Will they do the dance from the music box Babushka gave me? The music box had been my mother's final gift to her granddaughter before we fled Russia. It was a delicate thing with a tiny ballerina that rotated to the waltz of the flowers. Different ballet, asterisk Solnishko star. This one is Sleeping Beauty. Like the princess. She resumed her spinning, nearly knocking over a lamp in her excitement. Do I get to wear a dress? My best dress. I promise, I said, catching her mid-twirl and lifting her into a hug. Her small body felt warm and solid against mine, her heart beating fast like a bird's. And we are going in a fancy car. Moshe, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, raised an eyebrow. A fancy car? Provided by your generous employer, I assume? I set Katia down. Go brush your teeth, little one. It's bedtime. Once Katia had scampered off to the bathroom, I turned to Moshe. It is just a car service to make sure we arrive on time. Nastia. Moshe crossed her arms. This man gives your daughter silver jewelry. Now ballet tickets and a private car. You are smart enough to know what this looks like. It isn't like that, I insisted, though the doubt in her eyes mirrored my own uncertainties. He is just being kind. Men like that aren't kind without reason, Moshe replied, her voice dropping to ensure Katia wouldn't overhear. What does he want from you? The question had been haunting me since I left the penthouse. What did Adrien Sokolov want from a widowed immigrant housekeeper? If physical attraction was his goal, there were far more direct approaches available to a man of his wealth and power. If he simply needed reliable household staff, the gifts and personal attention were entirely unnecessary. I don't know, I admitted finally, but the tickets will make Katia happy. After everything she has been through, doesn't she deserve one magical afternoon? Moshe's expression softened. Of course she does. Just be careful, Nastia. This feels like a fairy tale. But remember, those always have a monster somewhere in the story. Her words stayed with me late into the night as I lay beside Katia's sleeping form, listening to her soft breaths. In the fairy tales our mother had told us, the monsters were obvious: bears with iron teeth, witches in houses of bones, wolves dressed as grandmothers. But in the real world, monsters wore expensive suits and offered kindnesses that bound you to them, thread by silken thread, until you were too entangled to escape. Yet, as I drifted toward sleep, it wasn't fear that colored my thoughts of Saturday, but a treacherous anticipation. The car that arrived at our apartment building was not the discreet town car I had expected, but a gleaming black Rolls-Royce with tinted windows. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with the unmistakable bearing of security rather than a chauffeur, held the door open as Katia and I approached. Ms. Kuznetsova, he greeted me with a slight nod. Mr. Sokolov sends his compliments. Katia clutched my hand, momentarily shy in the face of such luxury. She wore her best dress, blue velvet with a white collar, purchased second-hand but carefully mended and pressed for the occasion. I had spent hours on my own appearance as well, wearing the only dress I owned that wasn't strictly utilitarian. It was a deep green wrap dress that had once, in another life, been worn to gallery openings and theater premieres in Moscow. Mama, it's like a spaceship inside, Katia whispered as we slid into the leather interior. She ran her small hands over the seats in wonder, then noticed the small package resting on the center console. What is that? Before I could stop her, she had picked up the box with its elegant silver ribbon. The card attached bore only my first name in that same strong, slanting handwriting I had seen in the margins of Adrien's books. Is it a present? Katia asked, bouncing slightly in her seat. Can I open it? It's for me, I think, I said, gently taking the box. I hesitated, then carefully untied the ribbon. Inside, nestled in black velvet, lay a pair of earrings, teardrop emeralds surrounded by tiny diamonds. They caught the light filtering through the car windows, sending prisms dancing across Katia's awestruck face. They are green like your dress, Mama, she breathed. Like a princess. They were also clearly genuine and worth more than I earned in months. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the note beneath them. Asterisk to compliment your eyes. Enjoy the performance. Asterisk. A flush of heat crawled up my neck. The earrings were exquisite, precisely matched to my dress, which meant Adrien had noticed what I wore, had remembered, and had selected jewelry specifically to enhance my appearance. It was a level of attention that went far beyond employer-employee propriety. Aren't you going to put them on? Katia asked, still entranced by the sparkling gems. I should have left them in the box, should have returned them with a polite but firm note about boundaries and appropriate gifts. Instead, I removed my simple silver studs and replaced them with the emeralds, their weight unfamiliar against my skin. Beautiful, the driver commented, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. Something in his expression, knowing, perhaps even sympathetic, made me wonder how many other women had received similar gifts in this same car. The thought should have doused my pleasure in cold reality. Instead, I found myself wondering if any of them had felt the same conflicted thrill, this dangerous anticipation. Lincoln Center emerged before us, its grand plaza filled with Saturday afternoon crowds. The driver pulled up directly to the entrance, ignoring the signs prohibiting private vehicles. Mr. Sokolov arranged for priority entrance, he informed me, coming around to open our door. Someone will meet you inside. Enjoy the ballet, Ms. Kuznetsova. Thank you, I murmured, helping Katia from the car. She stared up at the towering glass facades and well-dressed patrons with wide eyes. Are we really allowed in there? She whispered, suddenly intimidated by the grandeur surrounding us. I knelt to her level, straightening the collar of her dress. Of course we are, Solnishko star. Today we belong anywhere we wish to be. If only I could make myself believe it. Inside we were met by an elegant woman who introduced herself as the house manager. Mr. Sokolov's guests, she inquired, though it clearly wasn't a question. Please follow me. She led us not to the orchestra seats I had expected, but to a private box overlooking the stage. Plush velvet chairs awaited, along with a small table bearing a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket, a glass of apple juice, and a plate of delicate pastries. Wow, Katia breathed, immediately gravitating toward the sweets. Are these all for us? Mr. Sokolov wished you to have the full experience, the manager said with a practiced smile. Please enjoy. The performance begins in 20 minutes. When she had gone, I helped Katia settle into her seat with a napkin to protect her dress from the pastry flakes. She swung her legs excitedly, pointing out the gilded decorations and crystal chandeliers with gasps of delight. I sat beside her, acutely aware of the emeralds at my ears, the luxury surrounding us, and the stares from patrons in nearby boxes, who clearly wondered about the identity of the occupants in what was likely known as Adrien Sokolov's private box. The champagne remained untouched. I needed clarity today, not the false courage. Alcohol might supply. As the house lights faded and the orchestra commenced the overture, I sensed a presence standing behind us. Turning around, I discovered Adrien framed in the entrance to our private box, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that highlighted the width of his shoulders. He had been observing me, with a look I couldn't quite decode. I didn't think you would make it, I whispered, careful not to disturb Katia, whose attention was already fixed on the stage. I had matters to attend to nearby, he answered, stepping forward to occupy the third chair in our box. I trust you don't mind the intrusion. Mind? The inquiry felt ridiculous considering we were only there due to his benevolence. Certainly not. It is your box, after all. And yet, I find I am the one who feels like the interloper. His eyes shifted to Katia, who remained unaware of his entrance, captivated by the dancers emerging on stage. She appears happy. She is. Thank you for this. I reached up to touch one of the earrings self-consciously. And for these, even if they are far too lavish. They suit you, he stated simply. I knew they would. Before I could offer a retort, Katia finally perceived our guest. She swiveled around, her curiosity overriding her shyness. Are you Mama's boss? She inquired with that blunt directness unique to children. Adrien's mouth curled into a sincere smile. I am. My name is Adrien. I am Katia. She examined him with open fascination. Did you give Mama the pretty earrings and my bracelet? Katia, I scolded gently. That isn't polite to ask. It is quite all right, Adrien reassured me. Turning to Katia, he nodded. Yes, I did. Do you enjoy the ballet? She nodded with enthusiasm. It's magic, like flying but on your toes. A flawless description, he concurred, his features softening in a manner I hadn't seen previously. I believe you will particularly like the bluebird variation in the third act. As the performance continued, my focus was split between the masterful display on stage and the equally gripping dynamic unfolding within our box. Katia had gradually shed her initial timidity, peppering Adrien with whispered inquiries during the pauses. To my astonishment, he responded to every question with detailed patience, clarifying the narrative and highlighting specifically arduous technical maneuvers with the insight of a true connoisseur. My mother was a dancer with the Marinsky, he revealed when I arched a brow at his knowledge. Before I was born. It was the first personal fact he had volunteered regarding his family, and I found myself craving more. Did she teach you to appreciate the ballet? A shadow seemed to pass over his countenance. In a manner of speaking. She passed away when I was 8. I am so sorry, I said, identifying the recognizable ache of early loss in his look. He shrugged, a motion that was dismissive yet oddly vulnerable. It was a long time ago. Katia, unaware of the heavy undercurrents in our exchange, tugged at Adrien's sleeve as the orchestra struck up the waltz from the first act. This is just like my music box, she cried out. The one from Babushka. Adrien leaned in closer to hear her over the swelling music. Is that so? Your grandmother gave you a music box before we left Russia? Katia nodded. It plays this song and has a tiny ballerina that spins around. A treasured possession, then, he remarked, glancing at me with an unspoken question in his eyes. I gave a small nod, one of the few items we brought with us. Our conversation might have proceeded, but the entrance of the lilac fairy on stage recaptured Katia's focus. She fell quiet, spellbound by the dance, unconsciously copying the fairy's arm movements from her chair. She has an eye for it, Adrien murmured, his breath warm against my ear. The timing, the precision. She has always loved to dance, I replied, keeping my voice low. But lessons. I let the sentence trail off, unwilling to voice the financial impossibility. Adrien remained silent, but I felt the weight of his stare, thoughtful and calculating. I recognized that look from our prior dealings, the expression he adopted when pieces of a private strategy were falling into place. It ought to have scared me, but instead, I felt a dangerous jolt of anticipation. When the final curtain descended, Katia clapped until her small palms must have stung, her face radiating delight. That was the most beautiful thing ever, she proclaimed. Even better than the movies. Adrien laughed, that same unguarded sound I heard so infrequently. High praise indeed. Are you hungry? I have arranged for an early dinner, if you would care to join me. The invitation caught me off balance. The ballet had already been an extravagance. Dinner would push us further into the realm of, what? I wasn't sure how to label this arrangement, but it had long since surpassed standard professional limits. Please, Mama, Katia begged, clearly charmed by both the performance and our enigmatic benefactor. I'm starving. Just a light meal, Adrien added, seeing my hesitation. At the Russian tea room. It seemed fitting, given the performance. The Russian tea room, one of New York's iconic establishments, and a place I had walked past but never dreamed of entering. We aren't dressed for a place like that, I hedged, though the excuse sounded flimsy even to my own ears. Adrien's eyes swept over my green dress, lingering on the emerald earrings that matched it so flawlessly. You look exquisite, he said softly. Both of you are attired perfectly. The compliment, spoken with such simple conviction, sent warmth rushing through me. Then we accept. Thank you. His hand rested briefly at the small of my back as he steered us out of the theater, the touch light but unmistakably possessive. Around us, I noted curious stares, whispers behind programs and opera glasses. Adrien Sokolov was evidently well known in these circles, and his presence with a woman and child was generating ripples of intrigue. Outside, the same Rolls-Royce waited at the curb. The chauffeur opened the door silently, and Adrien assisted Katia into the back seat before offering me his hand. His fingers were warm and firm around mine, holding on a moment longer than necessary after I was seated. The Russian tea room was only blocks away, but within the cocoon of the luxury vehicle, it felt as though we were traversing more than just physical distance. Katia chattered excitedly about the ballet while Adrien listened with surprising patience. I remained silent, observing their interaction with a blend of pleasure and unease. They looked right together, somehow this powerful man and my bright-eyed daughter, linked by a shared appreciation for beauty and art that transcended their vastly different worlds. The restaurant's interior was exactly as I recalled from glimpses caught through its windows, red leather banquettes, samovars gleaming on shelves, and the famous bear-shaped aquarium. The maître d' greeted Adrien by name, ushering us to a private booth in a secluded corner. Wow, Katia breathed, eyes wide as she absorbed the opulent surroundings. It looks like a palace. It is designed to remind Russians of home while impressing Americans, Adrien explained with a wry smile. A bit theatrical, but the food is authentic. He ordered for us in fluent Russian, selecting dishes I hadn't tasted since leaving Moscow: proper borscht with sour cream, pelmeni with butter and dill, and blini with caviar, though he requested sturgeon roe for Katia, correctly guessing that traditional caviar might be too salty for her palate. As we ate, I observed Adrien with fresh eyes. Here, surrounded by mementos of his heritage, he appeared more relaxed than I had ever seen him. The dangerous edge that typically accompanied his presence softened temporarily. He even smiled, really smiled, when Katia declared the cherry vareniki better than ice cream. "You have made quite an impression on my daughter," I remarked when Katia excused herself to visit the ornate restroom, accompanied by a waitress at Adrien's insistence. "She is a remarkable child," he replied, swirling the vodka in his glass. "Bright, observant. Much like her mother." I felt a flush of pride mixed with something more complicated as I met his dark gaze across the table. "Why are you doing all this?" "The tickets, the dinner. It is excessive for a mere employee." Adrien set down his glass, studying me with an intensity that made my pulse race. "Perhaps you have never been merely anything to me, Anastasia." The admission hung between us, weighted with implications I wasn't prepared to contemplate. "I don't understand what you want from me." "Don't you?" His expression turned serious. "I think you understand perfectly, but you are afraid to acknowledge it." Before I could reply, Katia returned, exclaiming over the golden faucets in the bathroom. The moment of tension evaporated as Adrien signaled for dessert to be brought, honey cake and tea served from a samovar, completing our Russian feast. By the time we emerged from the restaurant, twilight had descended over the city. Katia, full of sugar and excitement, leaned against me drowsily as Adrien directed the driver to take us home. "Today was like a fairy tale," she murmured, fighting to keep her eyes open as the car glided through Manhattan traffic. "Can we do it again sometime?" Adrien, seated across from us, met my gaze over her head. "Perhaps, if your mother agrees." The question in his eyes was clear, and I found myself nodding slightly, unable to deny my daughter or myself the pleasure of his company, despite the warning bells that continued to ring in the back of my mind. Katia was fast asleep by the time we reached our apartment building, her head heavy against my shoulder. Adrien dismissed the driver with a quiet word, then insisted on carrying my exhausted daughter upstairs. "It isn't necessary," I protested. "I can manage." "I am sure you can," he replied, already lifting Katia's slight form into his arms. "You have managed everything on your own for years. Allow me this small courtesy." Too tired to argue, I led him up the 4 flights of stairs to our apartment. Acutely conscious of how the modest surroundings would appear to someone accustomed to penthouses and private boxes, I unlocked the door with a whispered apology for the cramped space. Adrien said nothing as he carried Katia to the bedroom I indicated, laying her gently on the bed with unexpected tenderness. He stepped back as I removed her shoes and covered her with a blanket, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "Thank you," I said softly as we retreated to the tiny living area. "For everything today. It meant a lot to her." "And to you?" Adrien asked, standing too close in the confined space, his presence filling the room in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. "Yes," I admitted. "It was beautiful." He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek in a touch so light it might have been imagined. "You deserve beautiful things, Anastasia. You and your daughter both." "We have everything we need," I said, though even to my own ears, the assertion sounded hollow. "Need and deserve are different concepts." His hand moved to my ear, fingers tracing the emerald earring I still wore. "These suit you, as I knew they would. Accept them as a gift freely given, with no obligations attached." "There are always obligations," I whispered, fighting the urge to lean into his touch. "Everything has a price." Adrien's expression darkened. "Is that what you believe? That I expect payment for my generosity?" I don't know what to believe anymore. The admission cost me, but honesty seemed the only path forward. "I don't understand what is happening between us." "Then let me be clear." His voice dropped lower, intimate in the silence of the apartment. "I want you, Anastasia. Not as an employee, not as a conquest. As a woman who fascinates me, challenges me, and sees me clearly despite all my attempts at concealment. The declaration should have shocked me. But some part of me had known this was. It had been building steadily since that very first instant in Suite 718 when our eyes had initially met. It is impossible, I whispered, even though my body was already betraying me, leaning instinctively closer to him. You and I are two people who want each other, he finished the thought for me. The rest is merely circumstance, not substance. His hand slid to the nape of my neck, the touch warm and confident. I knew I should have pulled away. I should have reminded him of Veronica, of the strict professional boundaries, and of all the reasons this was a catastrophic idea. Instead, I remained completely motionless as he lowered his head, his breath mingling with mine for a suspended moment before his lips finally touched mine. The kiss was gentle at first, posed as a question rather than a demand. When I did not resist, it deepened, becoming something hungry and insistent that awakened an answering need deep within me. My hands found their way to his chest, feeling the solid strength beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt, the rapid beat of his heart mirroring the rhythm of my own. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing heavily, the weight of reality came crashing back in. This cannot happen, I said, stepping back from him. You have a girlfriend. I work for you. My daughter. Veronica and I are finished, he interrupted firmly. We have been for weeks, despite her reluctance to accept it. As for your employment, that can be arranged differently if it concerns you. And what about Katia? I challenged him. What place does she have in this? Whatever this is. Adrien's expression softened as he glanced toward the bedroom door where she slept. I meant what I said. She is remarkable. I would never do anything to harm her or come between the two of you. You barely know us, I argued, though my resistance was weakening by the moment. I know enough. His certainty was both frightening and alluring. The rest we discovered together. He reached for me again, and this time I did not resist as he drew me against him, his arms encircling me in an embrace that felt, against all reason, like coming home. Stay, I whispered against his chest, just for a while. He did, holding me on the second-hand sofa as I told him about Mikhail, about our escape from Russia after his death, and about the struggles and small triumphs of building a life for Katia in a new country. He listened without interruption, one hand stroking my hair, the other holding mine as if it were something precious. In turn, he shared fragments of his own story, his childhood in St. Petersburg, the loss of his mother, and his rise through the ranks of various enterprises until he had built his current empire. He spoke elliptically about his business dealings, and I did not press him, understanding instinctively that there were aspects of his life better left unexamined for now. Dawn was breaking when he finally rose to leave, pressing a kiss to my forehead with a promise to call later. At the door, he turned back, his expression more vulnerable than I had ever seen it. I meant what I said, Anastasia. There are no obligations here. If you want to step back, to return to a purely professional relationship, say the word and it is done. No consequences, no hard feelings. The offer of freedom only cemented my decision. And if I don't want to step back? His smile was slow and devastating. Then we move forward together, one day at a time. After he left, I stood at the window watching as his car pulled away from the curb. In the bedroom, Katia still slept peacefully, the silver bracelet glinting on her wrist in the early morning light. Whatever happened next would affect her, too. It was a reality that tempered my newfound happiness with caution. 2 months later, we moved into a spacious apartment in a secure building owned by one of Adrien's companies. Katia started at a private school with a strong arts program, flourishing under ballet instruction that Adrien arranged with former colleagues of his mother. I left my position at the hotel, though not my work entirely. Adrien understood my need for independence, for an identity beyond being his partner. As for Adrien himself, he remained in many ways the complex, sometimes dangerous man I had first encountered. His business dealings still included elements I chose not to examine too closely, and there were rooms in his life I had not yet entered. But with me, with Katia, he showed a side that few others witnessed. He was tender, vulnerable, and capable of a love so fierce it sometimes frightened me with its intensity. There were complications, of course. Whispers followed us at social events, speculation about the Russian maid who had somehow captured the untouchable Adrien Sokolov. Veronica made a scene at a restaurant once, her accusations sliding off Adrien like water as he calmly escorted us out, his hand protective at my back. His associates regarded me with varying degrees of curiosity, respect, and in some cases, poorly concealed disdain. None of it mattered when we were alone together, or when he read Russian fairy tales to Katya before bed, his deep voice giving life to the stories of my childhood. Or when he held me through the nightmares that still sometimes came, whispering reassurances in a mixture of English and Russian until the shadows receded. "Do you regret it?" he asked me once late at night as we stood on the terrace of the penthouse that was now as much mine as his, referring to answering that call in Russian. I leaned back against his chest, his arms secure around me as we gazed at the glittering city below. "Never. It brought me to you." His lips brushed my temple, a gesture that had become as familiar as breathing. "It brought us both home." And in that moment, with the weight of his emerald ring on my finger, and the future stretching bright before us, I knew he was right. After years of running, of surviving, of merely existing, I had finally found my place in the world. Not as the invisible maid who answered a call in Russian, but as the woman who had captured a heart as complex and unyielding as my own. Some would call it a fairy tale, others a calculated risk. I called it simply what it was, a love powerful enough to bridge worlds, to heal wounds, and to create a family from the broken pieces of our separate lives. And for that, I would answer his call 1,000 times over.